Clay is by far one of the most powerful sales enablement tools in today's market. You've probably run into this problem though. When you try and scale Clay using Clay credits, it gets super expensive, super fast. So in this video, I'm going to show you a few workaround methods you can use within Clay for data enrichment, which could save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, depending on your scale. Now, firstly, before we get into the video, I want to show you an example Clay table, which really exhibits how expensive using Clay credits can be. So looking over here, I've just run one row on myself just to not give away anyone's data. We started with full name, company name, and domain. I've then enriched the LinkedIn URL. So I've scraped the data from the LinkedIn profile, which costs 1 credit. And then we're finding work email using Lead Magic. That's another credit. And then we're validating email with 0 bounce, which is another credit. So overall, we're using 6 credits for this enrichment. If I just go to the column runs, we can see that for LinkedIn profile URL, we're using 3. For enriched person, we're using 1. For find work email, we're using 1. And validate email, we are also using 1. So altogether, this is using 6 credits for a bare minimum kind of enrichment. Now, I just want to allude to a LinkedIn post I wrote previously. I approximately worked out that it costs 0.0349 per credit on the Explorer plan, which gets you 10,000 credits. Now, if we do a calculation here based on our template table, if we times by 6, we get this number. So 0.2, so 20 cents. The cost comes out to $209.40. So that's just a row, 1,000 rows, using this very basic enrichment setup that I've provided here. So this really shows how extortionate Clay can be for a very basic enrichment setup. And it shows the importance of leveraging third-party APIs and tools, and also some of the functionality within Clay to reduce your costs. Now, I also just want to quickly speak about the pricing for Clay. As you're probably thinking, hang on, Rob, we're talking about doing outbound cost effectively, and Clay shouldn't even be in our tech stack for that. Well, that is true if perhaps you want to scrape data from Apollo directly and then just chuck it into a cold email or LinkedIn campaign. I like to do personalized, hyper-relevant outbound at scale. So I'm going to be showing you how you can do that within Clay for a reasonable price without breaking the bank. Now, just to quickly speak about the packages here, I would recommend 1 or 2 for the vast majority of people. So it's either going to be Starter or Explorer. The one difference which is worth mentioning between these two is the email sequencing integrations, the webhooks, and the integrate with any HTTP API. Email sequencing is going to allow you to integrate your API directly into a tool like HeyReach or a tool like SmartLead. Without this, you're not going to be able to do that. So you're going to have to manually export your leads into a CSV file. Webhooks is running a Clay table based on a trigger action or a notification inside Clay. Now that has its use case, but you won't always be using that. It isn't a big miss. I use it occasionally. And then integrate with any HTTP API. So what this means is you can just integrate with any third-party tool without having a native integration with Clay. The last point that I'm going to mention in the video, I do use a HTTP API, but that's really mainly for intermediate to advanced Clay users who are really looking to scale their data enrichment and their outbound. I think for the majority of people, you will be okay with this subscription, but just fair warning that one of the methods I'm going to be using is in this subscription, but it's only worth it if, you're doing, hundreds of thousands of kind of enrichments per month. So let's get into the good stuff. We're going to outline 3 methods that you can use right away to reduce your costs significantly within Clay for data enrichment and whatever function you're doing within Clay. The first one being is going to be conditional formulas. The second one is integrating your own API key from ChatGPT into Claygent and learning how to do advanced data enrichments using that API. And then finally, we're going to talk about how you can leverage tools like Appify Marketplace and the RapidAPI Marketplace to get API keys or scraper APIs connected directly into your Clay table that are often 5x cheaper. So firstly, let's run into the conditional formulas. I've got an example table here which greatly exhibits how effective conditional formulas can be to reduce your costs and get the most out of Clay. So what is a conditional formula, first of all, you're probably asking? A formula that permits a certain action if something is true or false. You can have and or mixed in there, but in general, that's the general idea of when you use conditional formulas. So a certain action is going to happen based on a condition that I set. Now, to really simply explain this, at the start of my table here, I've got first name and last name conditional formula set up. These are both designed to pull data from this full name into the first name and into the last name columns. Because if I want to run a cold email campaign, I will want to address people by their first name, so I need this as a separate variable. We can do this very quickly within Clay, so we insert column to the right, we choose formula. Now we can use the AI function within Clay, and this doesn't cost any money. So all I'm going to say is take the first word from full name. And as you will see, it will pull the first name for each of prospects in our list. Very simple. This is probably the simplest conditional formula you can use, and it's a good way of starting out. What we're doing is we're using a conditional formula to manipulate the data sets that we already have in our data, so we can organize and format it in certain ways, which will help aid us in our outbound activity. I had an enrichment in here, which is the LinkedIn activity checker. This is leveraging a HTTP API. I won't go into the specifics until we get to that later. What is required for this HTTP API to work is I need the LinkedIn ID. Unfortunately, I can't use a person LinkedIn URL. It doesn't work. The LinkedIn ID is everything after this /. So this bit here in the URL slug, which takes all the text after that /. And in certain instances, there's another / at the end. So I get it to remove that as well. And as you can see, we get a clean output for the LinkedIn ID. We press output is correct, save formula. And now this will run for each row without me spending a dime. Now our LinkedIn activity checker can run correctly. So this is a slightly more advanced way of thinking about it. Now we can also use Clay to run columns based on a certain condition. Now, for certain rows, we might not want to run some enrichments because they're either unqualified, maybe we don't have a validated email. It's not worth us doing further enrichment with that particular lead. So the way you can do this with the conditional formulas is actually within an enrichment. So I'm going to show you this href scrape. So in this instance, within this table, I do not want to scrape their traffic because this is going to be used in a variable in our campaigns unless they have a final validated email or they have LinkedIn activity in the last 2 months. So if we go to edit column here and we go back down to the run settings, you can set up a formula within each of your enrichments in the table. And this works for anything in Clay. So all I do here is only run if final validated email is not empty or recent LinkedIn activity date is within 2 months. This is a date column. So that's very important. Obviously we need it to be a date so the formula can actually assess the data. And then we've obviously got our final validated email as a variable. And now our traffic column, as you can see, it will only run for the cells where we have a final validated email or we have LinkedIn activity within 2 months. It's incredibly crucial when it comes to building lists within Clay. If you're doing complex enrichments and let's say you're using, 10 HTTP APIs or you're using, 5 different Claygents, there's often no reason to run all of those Claygents or all of those enrichments for every single one of your leads in your Clay table. Often I might split leads into certain buckets where, I only need to run a certain enrichment for those leads. I only need to run a certain enrichment for those leads over there. So the conditional formulas allow us to do this without creating a million different Clay tables. I wanted to show some ways which you can actually qualify and add data into certain campaigns depending on the variables within your Clay table. So here, as you can see, I've got multiple different smart lead enrichments that are running here for different campaigns. I've got multiple HeyReach enrichments as well. And each of these columns represents a campaign in my account. We have bespoke copy for these buckets and we want to add them to the campaigns accordingly. And we also want to automate it. And the way you do this is obviously using the API key within Smart Lead and Clay. But the next step is using these conditional formulas in order to do this. Let's show you an example for HeyReach, which is actually one of the more complex formulas I've set up here. So only run if current organic traffic is below 4,000, traffic loss is below 1,000 or is 0, and traffic stagnation is no, and recent LinkedIn activity date is within 45 days of the present date. This will now only run for those leads where we have decent significant traffic loss, and it will only go into that campaign. So now you can see how this conditional formula is now lead routing leads into the correct different campaign, and we're not having to manually split up the CSV files. Are we actually saving money with this? No, but we're saving a hell of a lot of time, because if you're having to manually QA each list and you've got like 9 different campaigns where you're segmenting leads, it's going to take you a long time to export the CSVs, set up the filters, get the CSV, add it to the campaign, make sure the variables are connected correctly. It just doesn't work very well. Moving on to our next way to reduce costs, and that is Claygent. Claygent is your best friend within Clay, but it will only be your best friend unless you connect your API key via OpenAI or Claude or whatever model you're using, right? Firstly, I'm just going to very quickly show you how to set this up within OpenAI. So you want to navigate to platform.openai.com. You need to unfortunately have a paid account, $20 or so a month, but that enables you to have access to the API key, which I promise you is worth the investment over the year, because you're going to save so much money from those API enrichments. So the way you want to set this up is you go to your API keys, you create a new secret key. It will come up with a screen here. You want to copy and paste that and keep it in a safe place, because once you've generated your key, you will never be able to find it again. You can't recover the key. And then you want to go to billing. And this is actually like quite an important step, because if some of you are starting out to use an OpenAI key, you might not be aware of this. So it's important to mention. You need to be in usage 2 in order for it to be functional within Clay. You need to add $50 worth of credit in order to land into usage tier 2. So you go to your billing here, maybe just do $50.10 just to make sure you're over the amount. And then you'll go back to your limits, scroll down, and you should have automatically moved to current usage 2. Once you've got this, you can go back to Clay. So we go back to our table here and we go edit column, choose your model. I always use ChatGPT 4o Mini. It's the cheapest, and for the vast majority of the tasks we're going to be doing, is more than accurate enough. Then what you're going to see here, it's going to be on Clay managed OpenAI account. You want to go down to add account, you want to input the name of your connection, and then you want to copy and paste your API key into this section here, and then save, and then you're good to go. You've connected your API key. I wanted to show this particular Clay table. This is something I've been working on recently with one of my clients. It really shows off the capability of what Claygent can do in terms of advanced data extraction and scraping. And hopefully it will change your mind and your perspective about how you see other data enrichment tools and how you can actually reduce the bloat in your tech stack. This particular lead, their target is head teachers. Now, they offer an automation tool which helps teachers mark faster, right? There's a score within the UK for schools called Ofsted. It's a governing body which will score the schools on a basic criteria across 4 different categories. Now, one of these categories was very interesting to me when I was doing my research and ideation for this campaign, and it was the leadership and management, because within this category, one of the points is teacher satisfaction. What's linked to teacher satisfaction? Workload. So if we can highlight accurately for each of our schools what grade they have, we can make our messaging much more relevant, and we can reach out to people at the right time. So if I see that they have a requires improvement score, I know that this is going to be a red hot prospect for me to reach out to, because they're going to be very interested about how they can improve their teacher satisfaction at their particular score. So I saw that this was publicly available data, and that there was a pattern in that every school will always have a table, and they'll always have, scrapable data which we can port back into our Clay table using Claygent. So then we prompt this using our API key, and we can extract the 4 inspection outcomes with these detailed instructions. So I can include the Claygent prompt. This very accurately was pulling this data for me, and it was only costing me 0.001 per row. So this is incredibly cheap, considering that this is actually quite a complex scraping task. It's got to scrape 4 different rows. It's got to validate the information is correct. It's got to validate if the school name is correct based on my instructions. Now, for other scraping tasks, it will be much, much cheaper, but this is a slightly more complex one which uses more tokens. But still, you could pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on a ready-made data list which has this information, but I'm doing it from 0.001 cents per row. Now, the second one I want to show you here, which is a little bit more simple, linked to the teacher satisfaction, because this is like the main pain pain point which we want to hammer home. This one's on teacher vacancies. So if we can see a high volume of teacher vacancies open at a school within a school term, that suggests that there's a problem with teacher retention, which then suggests that teacher satisfaction might be low at that particular school, and our tool might help improve the satisfaction by reducing their workload. So that's my hypothesis here. What I noticed was most schools have a job portal on their website. You can scrape and bypass other third-party tools which offer this as a paid service. Now, there's plenty of scraping tools where this is one of their unique selling points, but I've bypassed that and I don't need to pay for something in my tech stack, which is useless to me. So Claygent is your number one method for reducing tech stack because you can very easily scrape data. This prompt is then going to go to the school, it's going to navigate to their job portal, it's going to go through the vacancies and make sure they've got these particular titles. It's going to count them up and return this as a number for me. It's even going to give me the titles that they're hiring for in case that's applicable. I could be like, hey, you're hiring for the role of teacher of mathematics or something along those lines within my copy. It's not personalization for personalization's sake. We are actually pointing out a pain point here. The opportunity here is endless. It's essentially any data which is publicly available on the internet. Now, Claygent will sometimes have limitations with scraping big enterprise companies. So for instance, it struggles to scrape LinkedIn. So you're not going to be able to scrape LinkedIn. You'll need to use other tools and bypass that, but it can still scrape the metadata within a Google search for LinkedIn profiles. So I can still scrape LinkedIn URLs using Claygent. Now, finally, I want to move on to the third-party tools that we integrate. Now, sometimes, unfortunately, our Claygent lets us down and it's unable to get some data points that are often behind paywalls. A couple of tools are my go-tos. One being Appify and the next one being RapidAPI. So I'm going to walk through those two alternatives. Again, it's quite limitless. Any tool that has API functionality, you can integrate into Clay. So just bear that in mind. Now, of course, you will have to be on that Explorer subscription, which is, of course, a bit more expensive. But firstly, I'm just going to show you Run Appify Actor, which you don't need a HTTP API because it has a native integration within Clay, which makes it very attractive for running certain scrapes. This was a profile LinkedIn enrichment we were using. I needed to find the About Us section, their current job duration, and their LinkedIn followers for a particular client that I was building a data list for. Now, you probably saw earlier that I used the same enrichment within the expensive table, and that was correct. That cost 1 credit per row. This is going to cost us $5 per 1,000 rows, and we're going to get all of this data. You're going to get their full experience, even their interests, even their profile pic URL, their experiences. There's a huge amount of data. There's a huge amount of qualification you can do from this, and it's only cost us $5 for 1,000 rows. So now I'm going to show you how you integrate this. So let me just first quickly explain what Appify is. Appify, the best way to describe it, is a scraper marketplace. So developers build scrapers. They're available for sale in terms of usage or subscription. You choose what you want. So here you can see we have a Google Maps scraper. We have a website content crawler. We have a TikTok scraper. In our instance, what we care about is a LinkedIn profile scraper. So what you want to do, sign up to Appify. You get $5 free. So we're going to want to type in LinkedIn profiles, and I've chosen this particular scraper here. You can look at the information, the kind of detail that you're going to get before you start investing in the tool. It all looks very complicated at this point, but it's actually really, really simple when you get to running it. So to run it in Clay, what you're going to want to do, you want to save this as a new task. So you save as a new task, continue. I've already got a task for this, but I'm just showing you for the purpose of completeness. You're then going to go to your save tasks and it will be saved in here. So I've got one here. Then when we go back to Clay, so I'm just going to show you by creating a column. So you choose Run Appify Actor. So what this is going to enable you to do is run that particular actor within Clay. You choose your API, then you'll be able to find the scraper that you just saved as a task. So in our case, it's the LinkedIn profile scraper. And now we just need to input our input data. And by the way, this works for all actors. So once you learn it once, you'll never have to learn it again. You go to the JSON object here. What we actually want to do is we want to put like an example in here so we can see where we'll need to put the data when we export, we copy and paste the JSON object back into Clay. So I'm just going to put Rob Sloan here. And then when I swap to JSON, now we have a username column. So I can just copy and paste this over. we go back to the Appify actor, we put it in the input data, and then what we want to do is remove the username so we can find LinkedIn profile, and now we're good to go. We can save this, and this is now going to run like it has done here for each of them rows, and we can export any of these data points as a column. So whenever I need to find data, which I know is going to be behind some awkward paywall, or maybe I need to get a big chunk of data. So for instance, with this Appify actor, the reason why I use the actor is because I can't use Claygent on a LinkedIn profile. So my next best alternative is to use this scraper. Now moving on to RapidAPI. This is a similar process, but with RapidAPI, we will need to integrate the HTTP API. It's interesting to learn how to use this because the power of the HTTP API in Clay, when you get up to enriching 50,000 leads per month and above, this is going to save you a huge amount of money. RapidAPI is a API marketplace for developers. So essentially people resell subscriptions to API access to certain tools, or they build API access, or they build a scraper, they build a tool, and they sell the API for a subscription per month. So the really, really cool thing about RapidAPI is you can get access to tools like Ahrefs, SEMrush, or tools like this without actually having to have access to the tool or pay a monthly subscription. You can pay for the API specifically for the data points that you want, and then you go from there. So how do you use RapidAPI? Relatively simple again, but it's a bit more complex to set up than what we were doing with Appify. So in this case, I'm going to show you one I do with SimilarWeb, which is like an intelligence tool, so a competitor intelligence tool. The one I am using at the moment is this one here by Pinto Studio, and I am using this Get Analytics V1. So the thing we care about here from an HTTP API perspective, so integrating this into Clay, is this body here. So what we're going to want to do is we're firstly going to want to subscribe to the tool. So you go to the API so you can test it for free, and then you can go for the paid subscription. So firstly, you just want to test the endpoint. So I've just tested it now. This will show us, the data that we're going to get. So as you can see, we get a description, we get the country where the traffic's coming from, we get their split between social paid referrals, mail referrals, search direct. Now, of course, take this with a slight pinch of salt. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but it gives you a rough indication. We're getting a huge amount of data here. So how do you use this? So once you've paid for it, there's nothing you really have to do. This only costs $10 for 10,000 rows. Now, I tell you that SEMrush API, it costs $1,000 per month just to access their traffic analytics API. So this puts it into perspective how cheap you're getting this. The first thing we're concerned about is the URL, right? So we want to copy and paste this. You want to go back to your table, and here is the example, but I'm going to redo an example just to show you. So we're going to go here, and then you're going to type in HTTP API. We're going to go to configure, and then we want to go method is get. So whenever you're retrieving data from somewhere, it's usually get. It sometimes can be post though, so be a little bit careful. You can always find that detail here, so it will tell you what the request needs to be, and our endpoint is going to be that URL. There's one important thing to note here though. We obviously don't want it to run for Amazon for each row, so we need to replace this with a clean domain. So we've already nicely got our website enriched in this particular Clay table. So we're just going to go website. Now this is going to run dynamically, much like I showed you for Appify, much like I showed you for Claygent, right? It's going to run dynamically for each row. We then want to go back to SimilarWeb, and we want to input these headers. I'm not going to show you this exact process, but literally what you need to do is just copy and paste each section. I'll show you it for one. So we want to go to headers, key value pairs. We want to name that and then go back to RapidAPI. This is going to be the host. So we copy and paste this back, and we want to do the same for the API key. So we add a new header here. There's a bunch of other settings that you can do here. So for instance, you can actually choose the values you want to return. This is sometimes useful when Clay has like a certain data memory limit on a cell. So sometimes you can actually enrich too much data. What you can do here is you can add tags so you only pull certain data. We won't go into the nitty gritty, but it's just to highlight actually how much is available within these settings and how customized the HTTP API can be. And just to go back to our finished integration, just so you can see the finished work here, you can see here that all we had to do was integrate our API key, our host, and that URL with the variable and the GET request. And now this will run across all of our rows, right? So finally, what do we do with this data? We now need to put it into a campaign. So I'm going to show you how you can seamlessly add these leads once you've data enriched them for a very cheap price and add them into a tool like HeyReach. HeyReach. So what we want to do is we want to go to column, add enrichment. We want to choose HeyReach. Fortunately, HeyReach has a native integration, so we don't have to be messing around with a HTTP API, so we can add lead to campaign. At this point, we want to choose a campaign that we add it to. I'm just going to choose a random campaign just to show you. We can now map first name, last name, person LinkedIn URL. We can add any other data points we want. As you can see, these are already nicely inputted for us automatically by Clay. If we want to add custom fields, we can here. So if, for instance, I wanted to add traffic, we go like that. I can get current monthly traffic, bang. We've got traffic as a variable, which is within our Clay table, which will be imported into HeyReach. At this point, we want to press save and we can run it on a row. So just to show you that it's working, let's press save and don't run. And then I'll just choose one particular row to run this on. And this will now be added to the campaign, as you can see, without us doing anything. It's now going to be integrated moving forward. So when we add new data into these tables, it's automatically going to run and put those leads into our HeyReach campaign. For just a bit of context of where you find this API key, if you go to your settings here, you want to go to your HeyReach API within your integrations and get an API key. You then copy and paste your API key, take it back to Clay, and away you go. So let me show you the example I showed you earlier with the vacancies enrichment for one of my clients. We've got an 18% message reply rate for this campaign, 30% connection request rate. So it's been really successful for us. And this whole process is automated thanks to using Clay and HeyReach together in tandem. So we can create obviously this personalized copy. I saw that you had open vacancies at the moment, and then our CTA is a short video that works. Now we can obviously reference the open vacancies because we've done that Claygent prompt. So this really opens up also your ability to write hyper-personalized campaigns at scale, and you haven't had to break the bank to do it. So now you've learned how to save a ton of money using Clay. Click the video to the right of me where we walk through how to set up an end-to-end system using Clay, N8N, and of course HeyReach to scale your outbound without lifting a finger.